morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to CPPR Dialogue hosted by the Center for Public Policy Research. This webinar series brings together policy experts, academicians, and practitioners to discuss pressing policy challenges and propose actionable solutions to informed debate. Today, we continue our exploration of the Kerala Private Universities Bill, a topic sparking significant interest in Kerala's policy and academic circles. In our previous session, we examined the bill's intent and its implication for the larger state's higher educational landscape. This episode delves deeper into ensuring academic quality, maintaining curriculum standards, and establishing robust regulatory frameworks for private universities. As Kerala prepares to embrace the private universities, key questions emerge. How can we uphold academic excellence? How do private universities balance quality with expanded access? And how can their frameworks align with national priorities such as the NEP? We will also draw insights from best practices in other Indian states and international models to shape Kerala's regulatory and academic frameworks. I'm Sri Lakshmi Harilal, Associate Research and Projects at CPPR, and I'm honored to be your host for today's discussion. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dr. Ashwini Aris, Associate Dean at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, IALM University, Greater Noida. Dr. Ashwini brings a wealth of expertise in geopolitics, international relations, and energy management. Her research, spanning maritime security to climate cooperation, and her international engagements in Australia, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka make her the ideal guide for today's conversation. We are also privileged to have a distinguished panel of experts. Let me introduce Dr. Ram K. Sharma, Vice Chancellor, UPS Dehradun. A pioneer in academic transformation, Dr. Sharma has held leadership roles at Shiv Nara University, Amity, and UPS. His work in curricular innovation, internationalization, and quality assurance has elevated institutions to top national rankings. Dr. Sharma offers critical insights into balancing growth with academic integrity. Let me introduce Dr. Vivek Ahuja, Director of Accreditation, Ranking and Compliance in Doctoral Programs at Flame University, Pune. With extensive expertise at Flame, Ashoka, and Shivnada universities, Dr. Ahuja specializes in higher education policy and accreditation frameworks. His expertise in institutional governance and quality assurance will illuminate how private universities can foster innovation while meeting regulatory standards. Last but not least, Mr. Pankaj Vallabh, advisor, Nayanta University, Pune. With over 30 years in sustainability and social impact, Mr. Vallabh brings a unique perspective. His works at Nayanta University focuses on affirmative action and inclusion, offering valuable insights into fostering equity, diversity, and social responsibility in private universities. With that, I hand over the session to our moderator, Dr. Ashwini Aris, to steer this thought-provoking discussion. Thank you, and I look forward to an engaging and insightful conversation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. Thank you, Ram, Vivek, and Pankaj for joining us. I really couldn't think of anybody better to really host this conversation on academic quality and curriculum designing because we have had one iteration of this before on the intent of setting up private universities in Kerala. So I want to focus because a lot of people are interested in this sphere in Kerala, and Kerala itself do not have much, experience running private universities per se, because we have long been like very focused on public institutions, and now that we have Kerala is trying to really redraw this model from an NEP global standards, and obviously because of its unique socio-political and economic realities. Thank you so much for joining us here. I will first start with Ram. Uh, Ram, you bring over 3 decades of experience in Indian higher education, from leading roles as Vice Chancellor at UPS, founding director at Plaksha, Shiv Nadar University, Amity Group. Now, in all these roles, you have helped build institutions known for academic credibility and student centric practices. So, in your view, how did you do it? How did they do it? What were the key enablers of that trust? And because Kerala is very new in the private education space, private higher education space, What should Kerala prioritize structurally and culturally if they also have to gain a similar credibility? And the reason I'm asking is this because Kerala has long been very cautious, very resistant toward privatizing higher education. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ashwini. I think I'd like to start with a very interesting model that was given by um, a couple of experts. One is a professor at Boston University, and the other one was a World Bank expert, so to say. And this report is available online, was funded by World Bank, on how to create world-class universities, right? And essentially, they proposed a model which is very simple. And they said that in order to build a world-class university, you need three things, right? Uh, One thing is that you need concentration of talent, which basically means you need good quality students and good quality professors, good quality staff members, and so on. And by good quality students, what I mean is students who want to learn and not necessarily a student who has scored 99% or whatever in class 12th. That may or may not be a good indicator. It possibly is a proxy, but by a good student, I would mean somebody who really wants to learn and is willing to work hard. The second parameter that they mentioned was abundance of resources, right? If you want to create high quality world-class institutions, then you need a lot of money, right? And always this challenge is that where would that money come from? Unfortunately, in India, the governments over the years have consistently failed to support higher education by putting in that kind of money. And therefore has passed on the baton to private sector that, okay, because we cannot do it and we don't have money, so therefore you go ahead and do it, right? And the third thing which the model proposes is a great degree of operational freedom, decentralization, and autonomous governance. So these are the three things: high concentration of talent, abundance of resources, and decentralized way, a fairly autonomous kind of way of allowing the institution to work with autonomy and flourish, I mean, academically and so on. And at the intersection of these three circles is something which they believed world-class universities are created. Now, linked to this is what I mentioned is that because governments have failed to invest in India, therefore they passed on the baton to the private sector. However, not willing to let them operate in an autonomous manner. And I went through the draft bill for Kerala State Private University bill as well. And I still see that, there is a lot of confusion, and in some sense, a reluctance to accept the fact that you want to privatize or not, right? Because if you do want to privatize and you do want to encourage excellence, then you would create an enabling framework. Whereas here in the bill, I see a lot of um, provisions which are designed to curb the autonomy and kind of try to control, believing that private universities can get into some malpractices and therefore the quality can get compromised. So if your starting premise is mistrust about the private players, and also a lot of kind of provisions from the past or past practices. For example, asking for a huge endowment of 25 crores, which is going to remain idle and which will not be used for creation of infrastructure or hiring of people or giving scholarships, is a waste of money, public or private, right? Um, and I don't think any public university creates this kind of endowment. Then why to create such kind of requirement for private players who are anyway, there's no support promised from the government, whereas government is asking that a private player will have to give 40% of reservation. Now, if you create a financial model and if you have to support 40 students out of the fee that is paid by 60 students, what would be the financial model? Because government is shirking its responsibility of social justice. I mean, ideally, government should pay tuition fee for those candidates. The bill is also silent on what would happen if a university is unable to fill these 40% of seats, right? Then all the rankings and accreditations will go for a toss because your student faculty ratio will not be proper, right? Now, there are provisions which are not well thought through in the sense that you cannot lease or sublease your assets. Now, there's a standard model emerging in India these days that private universities are monetizing on their residential facilities, for example, right? Now, if a university is not generating revenues, how would they survive? How would they sustain? So I think the only player which could fit into this requirement as of now prescribed by the bill is or will be somebody who truly wants to enter higher education with purely philanthropic intentions and spending a lot of money, right? Without that, no private player would be interested. And now, if you see states like Uttarakhand, states like UP, many other states, they are offering capital subsidies upfront to attract private players. Whereas here, the language of the bill is more on the penalizing the players if they violate something, right? There is no, um, I mean, positive language or philosophy which is or a framework which is to attract investment into higher education rather than it is, as I said, it is a reluctant move which basically tries to control, tries to curb, tries to push them away, and then hope that somebody will come and succeed. This is not, I think, and also there are a lot of things which are, practices of the past. Again, prescribing in the bill itself that you need to have minimum 5 square meter of area per student. I mean, the world has moved on long time back using or from these input requirements to more outcome-based education and those kinds of things rather than measuring with measuring tape that you need to have 5 meters or 10 meter of square meter area every student. I mean, who cares? Whether your students are learning or not is the more important thing. But I think I'd quickly summarize that these three things, one is concentration of talent, the second is abundance of resources, and what kind of role the government can play in helping students attract and retain high quality talent, and two, fund the institutions. There is no word at all whatsoever of any intention from the state of helping these institutions, right? Either by way of subsidized land allocation. That is the least the government can do. That is also not there. So a private player is expected to come, buy land on their own, build assets on their own, operate on their own, give scholarships on their own, uh, reserve seats also on their own. Government is not going to do anything, and on top of it, be controlled by the government. Why would somebody do it? I mean, why would a private player like to do it? So, talent, resources, and decentralization. So, I feel, in my view, all three of them are missing from this draft bill. And if the government is serious about creating a world-class institutional infrastructure in the state, then they should really think that how would they attract good players, well-meaning players who have really good intention in providing high-quality education. Why should they come and set up in their state? And why not go to another state?
Thank you, Ram. I will actually now move on because you have talked about social justice. So I actually want to move to Pankaj now, and just ask this because the bill says that you need to reserve 40% seats for permanent residents and also mandates fee waivers for SC/ST students. The bill doesn't specify that about OBC or economically backward classes. So now you have decades of experience working in the social justice space. So what would a truly inclusive access policy look like for Kerala's new private universities, especially considering the state's layered socio-economic realities?
Thanks. So I think let me on the outset say that it was I think, a wonderful annihilation of the document by Ram, and I think really appreciate the level of detail he has. And every single point is valid, right? And I think one of the fundamental problems is that there is an aversion to the word private, right? So private is seen as a profit, blood-sucking entity. Probably if they had said, how do we create more non-state actors in education, probably there would have been some semblance of wanting to support. So I think there is a political error in using the word private as opposed to non-government. Because non-government is a much wider, more secular term, right? Private is seen. But I think given all that Ram has said about challenges, right? To me, there is an academic need for diversity in the classrooms, because our classrooms, these elite classrooms, you construct knowledge in the classroom via dialogue, right? And having one kind of student. And my fundamental problem is that the state university system, because it defines talent in a very narrow way, gets one kind of students, people who have kind of learned how to crack that one method. They kind of end up being there. And if you look at a Flame, if you look at a UPS, if you look at a Nayanta or Ashoka, Kriya, and the BMUs of the world, one thing they are doing well is defining talent in very different ways and allowing the child to kind of demonstrate how they will add value to the conversation in the classroom. Exactly the same way we look at faculty's talent. Faculty need not necessarily be somebody who has cracked a particular exam or got the PhD from. We might have people who have got academic scores which are much lower but who are exceptional faculty, right? And same applies to the student as well. So to me, having reservation per se is a good thing because it will force us to deal with diversity in the classroom. If you represent the diversity of India in the classroom, it's a wonderful thing. All the economic factors being kind of put to one side. The problem is, I don't want to downgrade the academic level of the classroom by doing reservations. And the reality is, most children who come from underprivileged backgrounds, and I'm not specifically using the word SC, ST because there might be within them elements who are extremely well resourced and can achieve whatever level of. People who are genuinely underprivileged often do not have access to the fundamental resources that allow them to engage when they meet a classroom like ours, right? But what has been really good is, I mean, my wife and I, we run our little organization by ourselves. There are several others in Pune who we are kind of working with, and we are seeing that extremely underprivileged children, if they are supported, if they are kind of exposed to the tools of knowledge construction that our kind of universities use, they perform exceptionally well. So kids from the slum in Pune gone to Kriya is getting a 90 OGPA, is also leading a dance club, is a part of the cricket thing, has fallen in love, is doing every single thing that a boy his age should be doing or a girl his age should her age should be doing. वो घोंचू बन के पढ़ रहे हैं, स्ट्रगल कर रहे हैं, वो भी नहीं है. They are being a part of the social network of the university. They are being part of academic network. They are doing extracurricular activities. They are doing internships in some MP's office as well. But that requires an effort. That requires somebody to get involved with supplementing these children's ability, because I'm a very strong believer in talent can be enhanced, supported outside the classroom. So a university like ours, which technically has a reservation policy, is required to take it. You require a parallel set of organizations that are involved in this talent support program. So Pune, we are very fortunate. There is a very large network of organizations that work with underprivileged children in the schools they are likely to go to support them. I think Kerala will have to learn and replicate if it is not doing that already. And it also then raises the question about what is the caliber of the state schools to prepare students for universities like this. Because we are not going to, I mean, a private actor who comes in, and especially philanthropic actor, as Ram is saying, because that's the only reason why you would come in, because there is no other reason to be involved with higher education under these legal frameworks. You have to be a pure philanthropist at heart. You would not want to run a shabby show, right? You will want to run a very, very high, academically, a very high quality institute, right? You are not going to pack the class with 40% kids who are not going to even cope with the requirements of the program. So that it needs to be a continuum. I mean, you need to start working with children. I mean, most municipal kids in many parts of the country are illiterate in grade 8, right? When they actually undergo the first test. I mean, Asar is very, very kind of gentle on some of the testing parameters. The reality is much tougher. So I think it needs to be seen as a, if you want people to actually access and benefit from these kind of organizations, then there has to be work you do before they come into these organizations. You also need to work on what will they do after they get out, because they are not going to kind of, there needs to be employment opportunities, there needs to be academic, there needs to be enterprise for them. So it is not that university khul gaya, I mean, university has been opened and that is the be all and end all. There is a huge amount of affirmative action work that happens before they get in. Because these are the children who will not have access to banking the way a privileged child will have. If they want to do an enterprise, how will they access an enterprise, right? UPS does a brilliant job of working on enterprise. But we need to then have an enterprise solution baked into the university bill, which is not there. And I'm not even sure whether if you start incubating and start taking shares, what would the response of the regulators would be, right? So affirmative action, I think it is a challenge for the university to handle 40 or 50, like Nayanta, we are targeting 50%. 50% children who will not be in a ability to pay the full fees. There is a challenge there. But I'm saying there are other colleagues who are working with the challenge. I'm not so bothered. I'm very happy that the university has opted for 50% children. But there is a massive effort that needs to happen before and after. And that we are not talking about at the moment. And if they are only from Kerala, and one other kind of, if there is a suggestion, one other kind of idea would be that again creates this situation where all the quote unquote poor kids are from one state. Right. So you have a diversity in the privileged kids and a lack of diversity in the underprivileged kids. Even though you're saying, yes, we all agree states are diverse, but they still are not as diverse as the rest of the country, right? So in order to actually represent diversity of India, we need to figure out a way where the national diversity is represented in both sets of students, the fee paying one and ones who require support. Limiting it only to a particular group is somewhere limiting.
Thank you, Pankaj. Actually, that's very interesting. Now, that also kind of takes me to this question on the quality of academics, because the title of the conversation is also academic quality. So, Vivek, my question to you would be, now, what does this academic quality mean in 2025? So does it mean the quality of the curriculum, the quality of the learning space, the learning experience, and what metrics could like Kerala's new institutions focus on right from the beginning? Like by metrics, I would mean measures to check the learning outcomes, employability, student experience, the student faculty ratio, equity, access. So, what metrics should Kerala's new private education institutions be focused from the beginning if they have to maintain that academic quality?
Right. Thanks, Ashwani. Am I audible enough? Yeah. So I think I should approach this question from two angles. So one is about philosophical metrics, and as Ram and Pankaj have already mentioned, there has to be amalgamation of resources as well as intent. So when you talk about resources, you have to be having money, and then when you talk about intent, giving out autonomy to the institutions and to the private players in the market now, and the intent of philanthropy. So these are philosophical metrics that you can have at the back of your mind. But when you talk about real academic quality, when you have to execute and implement, so in higher education, especially in context of private universities that are coming up, new private universities, we have to now move beyond infrastructures and regulations and compliances. It's not just about compliance and timely audits. I think it should be about culture and intention. And you're right, it starts with the curriculum relevance and rigor, and with introspections like, are programs current, and are they interdisciplinary, or do they prepare students for real world complexity and not just exams, and are they framed around learning outcomes and that build both competence and character. And when you talk about teaching effectiveness, it's not just about having maximum number of faculties with PhD, and student faculty ratios in place. It's also about whether they can connect and engage and adapt. So today, I think we need faculty who are supported to grow and experiment and to adopt student centricity and experiential pedagogies. And if you have a look at Bloom's taxonomy, which helps us in designing curriculum and adopt multidisciplinary and liberal setups of education. So I think assessment also takes needs a lot of importance there. So are we evaluating what really matters, and are exams and assessments fair and transparent and actually aligned to what we say that we are teaching? And as Pankaj already touched upon, what are the outcomes? So are the students getting enough opportunities when they graduate? So what are the outcomes, and are there enterprises for students? So are graduates walking out with the ability to think critically and solve problems and collaborate across cultures, and continue contribute I think meaningfully, whether to society or to the industry or to their own communities. So in context of what we are talking about today, Kerala has a very high socioeconomic fabric, and people are really very aware. So are the outcomes really going to be aligned with the society and community as at large? When you talk about academic quality and establishing institutions, I'll also touch upon from the NAC point of view, from the accreditations point of view. The quality of an institution also needs, also is dependent upon the culture, very strong culture of research and innovation. So which should not just be in labs, but also in classrooms and communities. So are the teachers bringing those research outcomes to the class and onto the field? And there is an important metric which is not much discussed, but I think should be, and as Ram also touched upon, that governance and academic freedom needs to be there. So the faculty and academic councils must be in charge of designing of curriculum and pedagogy and the teaching and learning techniques, that they should be free to apply those and decide on those in the classrooms, not just for autonomies for the sake, but because no academic culture, I think, can thrive under commercial or political pressure. So I think there is a very strong need for giving out autonomy to the institutions in terms of designing the curricula, and to give this freedom to faculty as well. And we cannot talk about quality, I think, without inclusion. And as also, you asked this question to Pankaj, that about access. So inclusivity and access also, I think, is a lateral measure of academic quality. We need systems that ensure all kinds of learners, belonging to different stratas, be it rural or first generational, or differently abled, and not only welcome them to this fabric, but also support them to succeed. So wherein affordability comes into the picture, and whether we have enough systems and resources to support these students to come forward and take benefits. So quality, I think, must be also, there are systems in place, and UGC talks about it, and the NEP talks about it, and NAC talks about it. So the quality needs to be something which is measured and improved continuously. So I think there are already established systems, and at least on paper we have documentations and policies in place, that there should be strong quality assurance cells, and we should rely on external accreditations as well, and outcome reviews and academic audits from time to time. So which allows institutions to reflect and reform and evolve. So that is what I think true academic quality looks like to me. It's not just like an event of audit, but a living process, so to say.
Uh, Thanks, Vivek. Actually, I'm taking governance and the audit, space from your question. And my question to Ram is, um, just like how he was mentioning, that we have these one-time audits that happen from UGC, from NAC, NBA, and multiple other audits. But how do we actually ensure that these governance structures are in place? Because one thing that you also noticed in your opening remarks was that there's a lot of resistance in the bill from the beginning itself, right? So that's a fear of a new change in the higher education space. And now to kind of counter it, if we have these governance structures that are in place, which kind of ensures a continuous culture, a culture of quality, a culture of inclusivity, then probably we will be able to kind of tack it better. So, though you have you in your opening remarks talked about these non-negotiables, so again, I'm trying to bring the conversation there to what, in your view, are those non-negotiables that can help design high-quality academic programs and high-quality academic institutions? What governance structures should be there in place to kind of ensure that quality as a continuous one?
Yeah. So thanks, Ashwini. I mean, two things. One is that, I've been part of this NAC committee that is drafting the maturity-based graded labels framework for the country recently, and therefore have been privy to the conversations that were going on, and a lot of debates happened within those committees also. Because when you say of quality, essentially it can consist of three things. I mean, again, broadly. So one could be an input. I mean, whether the input is of a certain quality, right? Then there is a process. I mean, you are processing a certain thing. In this case, you are delivering a certain kind of academic experience and delivery to a student, right? And therefore, this is the entire process for the entire duration for which the student will be with the institution, right? That's the kind of process, and everything revolves around the student experience, whether it is research, whether it is classroom teaching learning, whether it is outside the classroom experience, cultural clubs, societies, sports, extracurricular engagements, volunteering, internships, field visits. All those things would be part of the process. And the third thing is, which is a very significant thing for a student and family and parents, will be outcome. That after having gone through a certain input and a process, what is it that the student is getting out of it? What is the outcome? And which would be also the intention of the state, or which should be the intention of the state and the regulators, that whether the student outcome is good, whether an outcome also has several dimensions, right? It could be a large number of students might seek an employment after completing of studies. So what is the employment quality that they are getting, right? The second is possibly they want to go for higher studies, right? Or for example, third could be they might want to become entrepreneur. They want to have their own startup and want to create jobs. Or for example, they might want to become a politician, a political executive, or a bureaucrat, or a social service sector leader. I mean, all kinds of dimensions are possible. Now, the challenge is that how do you balance between these three things: input, process, and output? And therefore, what kind of governance structure you should have which facilitates and balances between these three things, right? And each one of them is important in some sense, because if your input is not of a certain quality, no matter how good your process is, the outcomes are likely to be affected. Similarly, if your input is good quality, if your process is not good, then outcomes will get affected as well, right? So for outcomes to be good, both input and processes should be good enough, right? And therefore, the governance which is there for the institution should try to balance between the autonomy and accountability. Because generally what happens that in our country, unfortunately, wherever autonomy has been given, the accountability structures are very poor. Or without giving the autonomy, institutions are pulled up and kind of are made to be accountable. Both are kind of counterproductive. So a right balance of autonomy and accountability has to be created. And I mean, I think two, three things that comes to my mind immediately is one, that in terms of governance, there has to be, and especially when it comes to private institutions, there has to be absolute arm's length distance between the way the institution is governed. I mean, the people who are putting in money versus the people who are running the institution, there has to be an arm's length distance. The people who have money may not be the best people to run the institution or play the kind of significant role in day-to-day operations of the institution. So that arm's length provision has to be incorporated in the bill. Currently, it doesn't have that. And how would it ensure that this interference is minimal? I mean, of course, vision will come from the people who have money and they would want to create a certain kind of institution. So at the time of envisioning, I think somebody from the government side should co-create the vision, sit with the promoter and then help them facilitate that vision if somebody wants to create a great institution. So that government should not become an impediment in creation of a great institution, rather it should become facilitator. And at the same time should ensure that once the visioning is done, then the promoters and the investors should not get involved into day-to-day operations of the university and interfere, so to say. That is one piece. The second is, once the autonomy part is fixed, then the accountability measures has to be built in, and milestones needs to be defined in terms of whether the institution is moving on the vision path or not, right? And then there are several milestones. I mean, of course, there is end product is outcome, but that end product can be achieved maybe after 4 years when a student will first batch will graduate for an undergraduate program, for example, right? But the institution cannot be in dark for 4 years, and therefore there are several milestones or indicators which could be used. For example, NEP talks about professional standard setting bodies. Now, unfortunately, India has several regulators. Hopefully, the Higher Education Council of India will come into existence soon, and all these regulators will get merged into one regulatory body. But what NEP says is that all the current regulators should become professional standard setting bodies, which means that they should define that what should be the level learning outcomes for students. And by that, what I mean is that a BTech student, for example, after completing first year, what all outcomes or competencies those students must have or should have to demonstrate, and how will they be measured. Now, this work, unfortunately, in India has not been done properly at all. So we do not know what the level learning outcomes for students are and how should we measure them, and therefore the quality. So if the state is really serious, I personally think that we should create these professional standard settings and then measure whether the students are learning or not, right? And that can help the institutions also, both public and private, because this is not because, whether students are learning in private, public institutions also, we don't know, to be honest, right? It all um, comes to the fore or knowledge much later, which then becomes a post-mortem exercise, right? For example, we read this news that, the placements, for example, by and large for most engineering colleges in India is poor. But this we get to know every year, but the students lose out 4 years even before knowing at the end of first year that they are not going on or moving on the right track, and what are the interventions that they need to take, right? So this governance and quality, autonomy and accountability, I feel, are all linked, and therefore certain frameworks needs to be created and ideally should be embedded within the bill so that it provisions for those kinds of checks and balances within the kind of framework of the law.
Thank you, Ram. Actually, that was quite detailed an answer and very helpful, actually. So, I think I will move on to Kutch and ask that Pankaj, in a space like Kerala, which again I'm reiterating has long resisted privatization for decades after even independence. So, how with the moment we say private universities, it is synonymous to elite spaces, unfortunately. But how can these new institutions that are coming up in Kerala be the ones that kind of help ensure that there is upward mobility possible? And whatever, no matter what background they come from, how do we ensure that there's dignity of learning to every student who will be there in those spaces?
So I think just one quick add-on to what Ram said, because what Ram said is very powerful. And if we look at this entire autonomy, independence, imposition of whims and fancies of the economic founders, the the kind of constraints that have been put in the private universities actually make the donors incredibly powerful, right? And we have seen a very, very high profile case very recently where I think there was an abject surrender by the founders of their their role regarding the management of university. And given Kerala and its very, very strong history of student politics and faculty politics, it doesn't bode well if we don't figure out how to handle that, right? So regarding elite spaces, I think to some extent the criticism is robust, right? I mean, these are going to, because you are subsidizing 40%, 60% are required to pay for the 100, you are going to be talking about cost structures that appear scary, right? 10 lakhs, 12 lakhs, 6 lakhs, 8 lakhs per year is the kind of norm that you are looking at. And add to that the fact that an Infosys can get a land at 25 paisa or 30 paisa or 91 paisa. I saw some crazy number recently. We'll be probably paying a couple of crores per acre to buy our lands, right? There is no facilitation as well. Forget subsidy. There is no facilitation of acquisition as well, right? So there is a so the costs reflect the real cost of running a high quality institute, right? So those numbers will be high because what you're trying to do requires those inputs, right? So I mean, nobody's going to be driving in Rolls Royces inside the campus. But even if you have a golf cart, it is going to cost money because you're going to pay for it, right? But the fact is 40%, 50% would be getting financial support. And this is the only way they could actually access education of this quality, right? So to me, the other part, which again these current organizations do incredibly well, is because they understand and know the fact that their classrooms are going to be having this kind of heterogeneity, the classroom processes actually value the lived experiences of the children who are coming in. So, agar aap you're talking about design thinking, you'll talk of Dharavi, you will not talk of EU or Copenhagen or whichever other place that the standard professor might talk about, right? So, you value what the child brings in, right? To me, fee and economic part of equity is a constraint. We need to handle it. And the child is aware that somebody else is paying for it, right? But that is a transaction that kind of goes out of equation very quickly. I think the more important conversation is how in every single interaction with the child, you are ensuring equity. How, and equity is not I mean, with the financial equity partner, to me, is important to one team in the university and it should actually not go beyond that team. वो financial aid team, I mean, if that problem spreads beyond that, then you are not running a high quality institute, then you are running something else, right? So there is a FinAid office, it has an important role to play, but beyond it, beyond their doors, it should not step out. I think what the new universities do well, given the resources they get in, given the mindsets they get in, given the fact that people who are promoting them technically cannot be doing anything apart from being philanthropists and well-intentioned at heart, they do the rest of the bits very, very well. And I think that is what, in my head, differentiates an engineering college run by, say, the Munjals or UPS from many of the IITs, where an underprivileged child was seen as a restriction to quality education as opposed to being an enabler of quality education. Right? So I think that is the distinction. FinAid is a part of it. It's important to people who are working and trying to balance the budget. It's what we do outside that has been sorted out actually makes the campuses inclusive. And the other things are, again, there are many other things like something like an internship, right? Many students who are privileged are able to access internships because they know who can give them an internship. The good private universities will proactively arrange quality internships for all and ensure equity in that distribution. So it's not that if you come from Delhi and your daddy is a hotshot consultant, you get into the big four. You actually undergo through a panel, everybody gets access to a similar quality of internships, they get access to similar quality of exposures. So I think equity outside financial aid to me is the most defining feature of the equity program of these organizations. And the fact that you design structures in a way that actually it actually goes beyond equity. It actually says you are a resource and we will actually emphasize the fact that you are a resource. You tell us what is happening in the real world, which others can't. So yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of thought has to go into that, and some organizations are doing it very, very well. And I think that's what gives us hope.
Thank you, Pankaj. Now, as we are running short of time, but I have prepared one questions each, so we'll quickly go through it because I do want to cover them. My question to Vivek. Vivek, one of the key features of the Kerala Private Universities Bill is multidisciplinarity. And now you have worked in liberal education institutions, as institutions that have pioneered liberal education in India. Now, in your thought, what how would, like, because see, traditionally, if you look at all the public institutions, we have relentlessly relied on pen and paper examination, rote learning, a lot of dependence on them. But private universities have really figured out innovative techniques of evaluation, and with AI now coming in and disrupting the entire education and employment sector, how do you envision this change? That because Kerala's starting from the scratch, there's a lot of possibility of really looking at it and beginning it from with the proper vision. So how should that look like, especially in curriculum and assessments? How does a multidisciplinarity education look like?
Right. Thank you, Ashwani. I think this is an opportunity to talk about various kinds and forms of offerings that we have in the higher education system today, and also about those that we aim for. I would like to approach this question from a couple of ways. That how did liberal education start? So I'll look at it from the lens of traditions, and then the context that we are talking about right now. And again, as you asked in the latter part of your question, that how do we make this happen? What are the tools? So idea of all the domains of knowledge like science and mathematics and vocational and professional studies, communication and expressive arts and so on. I think they're a part of unified tradition that is deeply rooted in Indian thought. I refer to this from the NEP now, which clearly explains that combination of these are what we now describe as liberal education, that is broad, integrative and socially responsible education, and together which should be called as arts, and hence the delivery of all of them together to be known as the notion of the knowledge of many arts, and in the modern times that is known as liberal arts. So this is all a continuation of this indigenous philosophy. So that's the lens of tradition, that where is this liberal angle and multidisciplinarity coming from. So and now about from NEP, as I already mentioned, it envisions this and calls for education that is not only multidisciplinary but also holistic, that would help nurturing intellectual and ethical and civic capacities in individuals, and that would also urge institutions to remove rigid boundaries and encourage students to explore and connect and create across disciplines. So that is the context basically. Why do we need such individuals in the society? Because there has to be some knowledge about critical thinking and problem solving, and not just routine problems, but also problems in context of society. So this vision must also reflect in now what we talk about tools, how we assess, as Ram also mentioned, how do we assess things? So how do we assess student outcomes? And so how do we assess and evaluate our students' work? So if we rely on final exams, we reinforce shallow learning, but by introducing formative and ongoing assessments, continuous assessment through projects and through portfolios and peer reviews. So by this, I think, in a sense, we promote a deeper engagement with students. So these approaches, basically, again, I would like to reflect upon what I earlier in my conversation, I talked about Bloom's taxonomy, which progresses from remembering and understanding to applying and analyzing and evaluating and creating. So these are also known as higher order capacities when you talk about the taxonomy. And ultimately, the learner should also be able to value what is being created. So this is how I think we should develop learners who are not just knowledgeable, but capable of critical thought and collaboration and leadership in this world, in today's world, and which is actually witnessing a lot of change. So if you took a look at what is happening internationally and globally today, world is also going through a crisis. So how do we critically evaluate these things? So to close this, I think, and I hope I could answer your question, but I would also like to say that in Kerala, Kerala has long excelled in literacy and examination based system and examination performance. But now we have a legislative opportunity here, and we must shift from rote learning to real learning, and by meaningful circular reforms, the curricular and also drawing from our indigenous educational traditions and adopting tools that truly measure understanding and growth. I think here lies an opportunity that right from the initiation, we should be able to do things really well.
Yeah, I think I'd like to flag one more thing, Ashwini, which is mentioned in the bill, and which could be a potential roadblock in creating multidisciplinarity, which is a provision that allows these private institutions to have multiple campuses within the state and up to 4 or 5 campuses, right? Such that the main campus is of 10 acres, and then there could be other campuses also. Now, multidisciplinarity becomes almost impossible if you have fragmented, geographically uh, distant campuses from each other, such that you cannot have all your schools or offerings on every campus, right? For example, your humanities and social sciences campus would be different, your computer science or STEM campus would be different, your maybe performing arts campus would be a different campus, and so on, because you cannot have them replicated on every campus, because that would be resource intensive, right? And when you have physically away campuses from each other, then it would restrict students' ability to attend or take courses or classes from these campuses. Flying from one campus to another campus is not possible, right? So that also needs to be carefully thought through, because if you really want to create a multidisciplinary ecosystem, then you have to have a unitary campus. You cannot have multiple campuses spread across the state and so on, or else you'll have to then engage into online pedagogy and those kinds of things. But then online again has its own constraints, regulatory constraints also. You may not offer STEM courses in an online mode. Labs becomes a problem. All kinds of challenges, they come into play. So there has to be a balance between what do you want to do in multidisciplinary kind of aspect and the kind of physical structure and design that you are doing for your campuses. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Actually, thanks, Ram. That was my question to you also. So somehow I wanted to ask you the same question that, because what could Kerala's this upcoming private institutions do differently compared to what, because what are the earlier mistakes that usually private institutions make, and what could Kerala's upcoming institutions do? But anyway, you have covered. I mean, that
No,
was a really.
so in that case, I'll add one more quick point, is
Mm,
that the financial model has to be carefully thought through by the government first. Institutions would come into
okay.
picture later, right? And I
Mm,
picked up from what Pankaj had mentioned,
mm,
that assuming that institutions will maintain a student faculty ratio of 15:1, which is like the national norm also,
mm,
uh, what kind of fee that the institution will be charging? Because government is saying government will not pay anything whatsoever, right?
mm,
Even to become self-sustainable, um, and I have a very basic thumb rule that
mm,
higher educational institutions generally spend 40% of their revenue on salaries. If you want to hire really good quality staff, then maybe 45% to 50% of your revenues go on salaries. About one third go on all the operational expenses, travel, admin, this, that. And initially, to set it up, you also have a setup cost. You will do marketing, branding, you will spend money on admissions related activities, IT, all kinds of things. So generally, that also costs about one third. Now, if 15:1 is what I want to achieve, and even if I follow UGC prescribed seventh pay commission and not pay anything over and above, generally, if you want to attract high quality talent, then you'll have to pay much higher. But let's say even if I stick to basic UGC seventh pay commission, assistant, associate, and professor, if I maintain the cadre ratio, the average salary I will pay is around 20 lakhs rupees, right? Now, on 15 is to a faculty. And similarly, to a staff member also, I'll pay 8 to 10 lakhs rupees of average salary. So generally speaking, the faculty to staff ratio is also about 1:1. So which basically means that on every 15 students, you would have a faculty who is paid on an average 20 lakhs rupees and a staff member who is on an average paid 8 to 10 lakhs rupees, right? So let's say for the sake of simplicity, let's say 30 lakhs rupees. which is about 40% of your total revenue, which means that your total revenue should be around 70 lakhs minimum, right? If you want to follow this structure, which means that from 15 students, on an average, you will be charging 5 lakhs rupees per annum, right? And the living costs are over and above. This is just the tuition cost. Now, out of these 15 students, if 40% are not paying, right, then 9 students will be paying your 70 lakhs rupees, which means the average cost of education we are talking is about 8 lakhs rupees a year, right? Which is what Pankaj also was mentioning, right? And of course, you would also want, so it's not that only these 40% students will need support. There will be a lot of unreserved candidates also from general category and OBC categories, and maybe women candidates you might want to support, or maybe some other bright students who have genuine needs, right? So let's say even if 10 or 20% of those kinds of students are added, so generally your 40% students will be fee paying students and 60% students will require some form of support. So which means that 6 students will have to bear this cost of 70 lakhs rupees, which means easily 10 to 12 lakhs rupees annual of tuition fee. Now, this has to be thought through by the government, that what kind of model do they want to create. In the name of private education, are they willing to allow institutions to charge this much of it? Because this is the bare minimum that the institution will need to survive. I'm not even saying quality. If you want to hire a good faculty member, you'll have to pay the salary, right? So that kind of a conversation is required. Forget about multidisciplinary and everything. I mean, this is the basic structure of the institution which will be created. So this has to be deliberated upon and thought through, because the kind of uh, political philosophy Kerala has adopted was more socialist, more inclusive, and that kind of a thing. If you want to create a structure which will charge this much, would the state be comfortable with this?
That's very interesting, and we have a hard stop. So unfortunately, but I would really like to take this conversation forwards, probably in a different time. So before I hand it over to Sri Lakshmi, I really want to thank all three of you. Thank you so much for this really enriching conversation. I'm sure not just for the audience, even for me personally, it was really thought provoking, and a lot of aspects have come to the table. So thank you so much. Now over to you, Sri Lakshmi.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwini. Yeah, as we draw today's insightful discussion on the Kerala Private Universities Bill to a close, we are immensely grateful for the in-depth and clarity brought to this critical topic by all our esteemed panelists. So, on behalf of CPPR, I extend our deepest appreciation to our esteemed moderator, Dr. Ashwini Aris, for skillfully guiding this session with expertise and finesse. Thank you, Dr. Ashwini. And to our distinguished panelists, Dr. Ramki Sharma, Dr. Viveka Hoja, and Mr. Pankaj Ballab, we owe a special debt of gratitude. Your profound insights drawn from your extensive experience and leadership in higher education have enriched our understanding of how private universities in Kerala can achieve academic excellence, ensure robust regulatory compliance, and foster inclusivity while aligning with the NEP of 2020. So, your diverse perspective has sparked meaningful dialogue and provided valuable guidance for shaping the future of higher education in Kerala. So, a big thank you to all the speakers who have found the time to join us for this conversation. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to our engaged and thoughtful audience. So, this webinar is part of CPPR's ongoing dialogue series, where we strive to facilitate meaningful conversations on policy and governance issues that shape our society. So, we invite you to stay connected for our future sessions, and where we continue to explore the implication of private universities bill and other critical topics in Kerala's higher education landscape. So please follow CPPR social media channels for updates, insights, and announcements about upcoming events. Once again, thank you all for your valuable contributions to this enriching discussion, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next session, sir. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.